I'll note, I'm not sure if all of you know, but there's an app for this conference that you can download and see what time the sessions are. If you open up your app now, this talk is actually going to be simulcast in British as I speak, if you want to be able to follow along. But don't do that, though. I'm just kidding. Okay. Does anyone know who the woman is on the slide here? Can anyone identify her? Anyone? It's Princess Anne. Believe it or not, I didn't know that when I saw the pictures. Does anyone know who the man is in the same picture? No one? Okay. That's Thomas McInerney, who is the chair of our Pediatric Care Online Editorial Advisory Board. He's also the editor of the American Academy of Pediatrics Textbook of Pediatric Care, and also a recent past president of the AAP. So I didn't expect you to know who he was. These case studies are an opportunity for you to hear how different publishers and different organizations have worked globally. It may not particularly apply to you specifically, but we're trying to keep some certain things general so you can try to apply them to your own businesses and missions. As an overview, even though this is a diversity of things, we're also in the Chicago area, like Maria's organization. Our Department of Publishing within the AAP functions as a full-fledged publishing house that helps to support the overall mission of the Academy. Our headquarters is in Elk Grove Village, Illinois, and we also have an additional office in Washington, D.C. that does advocacy efforts on behalf of the Academy. Our membership organization consists of 64,000 members. It'll actually, in July, we'll be upping that count to 66,000. It's primarily primary care and academic pediatricians that are among our membership. One thing of note is that our motto, our slogan, is to be dedicated to the health of all children. So we are focused on children in addition to the needs of our member pediatricians. Now, AAP Publishing, the Academy has the largest pediatric publishing program in the world. Give you a sense of some of the types of publishing that we do. We have books for health professionals. Red Book is a very well-known infectious disease resource. The neonatal resuscitation textbook is used worldwide for professionals, health professionals. We've been doing these books for over 80 years. Also in this corner, you'll see an example of some of our books for parents. We're celebrating our 25th anniversary of Books for Parents this year. We also have a patient education publishing program. You can see personified by the typical trifold brochures that you find in pediatricians' offices. And we also obviously have a suite of journals, best known for our flagship Pediatrics there in the middle. And we also do digital publishing, and that includes online websites, it includes ebooks, it includes mobile apps, and video publishing within that program. I'm going to talk about our digital publishing program. We're really well known for innovations within digital publishing, with Pediatrics being one of the earliest journals online, and also our Red Book product being one of the earliest books online as well. This is an example of the various types of publishing that we do. One of the newest brands on there is our AAP Gateway site, which encompasses the Pediatrics Journal and others. We also take a lot of pride in the awards that our resources have received, and you'll see some apps and some videos on that screen for the logos as well. Okay. There's a couple of AAP publishing goals that come into play for this case study. One AAP publishing goal is to strengthen a product that we call Pediatric Care Online. If I slip into a lingo of PCO, that's what I'm talking about. And we want to strive to make sure it's known as the essential AAP point of care content resource. It's made up of a lot of the key brands within our publishing program, including Red Book, including the textbook of pediatric care that I mentioned. It includes a brand called Bright Futures, which is well child care visit guidance for professionals, and it includes a lot of links to AAP policy statements and other resources within it. There's another key AAP publishing goal that makes sense for this case study as well, is to expand AAP international activities through publishing. Now, our core publications also are well received globally, but we also have a lot of publications that are specifically focused on global health, including some of the ones that are shown there. Okay, now to get into the case study, we've got a site called Pediatric Care Online. I've got the URL on there if you want to take a look at it, and how we changed it dramatically by adding an A to it for pcouk.org. Okay, how did this opportunity start for us? It was actually a simple anonymous demo at our national conference in San Francisco. We still don't know who gave the presentation to an anonymous person from the UK, but it went very well, showcasing our relatively new Pediatric Care Online site, showing all of the features and capabilities of that site at the national conference and exhibition. We didn't know about it at the time, but the person who saw this demo at our conference went back to the UK, and it led to anarchy in the UK. I mean, enthusiasm in the UK. So on that side of the globe, they were talking about how they should do this for their country and for their organization. They then approached the AAP, and the name of the society is the Royal College of Pediatrics and Child Health, and they came to the AAP to find out how we could work together on a project like this. Now, there had to be mutual interest to do something like this, to work on a collaboration, and even with Maria's story, this story is much more compressed time frame-wise, even though you talked a lot from 2011, 2012 to current. This is way more compressed than even that. Some of the reasons for RCPCH to work on this is that there was a pressing need to improve the health outcomes for children in the UK. There was a report of the children and young people's health outcomes from 2014 and 2015. That was by the UK Department of Health. And that said that despite some improvements in measured outcomes for children and young people over recent years, the evidence is still telling us that this is at a slower rate in the UK, and that they are poor in many areas when compared to other countries in Northern and Western Europe. So they had a pressing need for real change and healthier outcomes for children. They did have some funding, and they had an ambitious timeline, which meant that they knew it was desirable to work with the AAP rather than starting from scratch, which, as we all know, when you have a new product to develop, it's going to take time. And if you don't know that at the beginning, you're going to find that out really soon. And why for the AAP? There really are two things, and it's one simple line there, but this is important, that it was a fit for mission goals, but it was also a fit for the publishing goals. And I mentioned a couple of the publishing goals earlier in this presentation. So we did it. Our initial discussions were throughout 2014. We did have a joint initial press release in July 2014. We didn't, even though the press release already went out, we didn't have an official letter of agreement between the two societies until December 2014. To give some perspective on how we handled this as an organization, is we handled it as a project management and a licensing arrangement. That was the model for this particular project. And we did the public launch of the Pediatric Care Online UK site in January 2016. That's a nice simple URL if you want to take a look at that, pcouk.org. So as you can see, it was very fast, and that was even with a slight launch delay. What I'm going to do over the next few slides is just give some key takeaways. This is all still fresh. As you know, it just launched in 2016. We're going to learn a ton from this throughout the lifespan of both products. But there were a number of themes that came up through this quick process. That is, you try to relate this presentation to your own scenarios, you might want to think through some of these elements. One that's really important to me is managing staff priorities. This is a very exciting project, something that's very easy to enjoy and get your leadership around. But we had a very exciting US site, Pediatric Care Online, that was in continual active development. As I said in earlier slides, very important to us to have that be the premier site for the US. We also had freshly relaunched the site. So when I mentioned that demo at our annual meeting, that was actually on a different platform, an earlier version of the site. So as some of these discussions were happening, we were in the midst with our own staff of relaunching and rebranding our site and keeping our partner abreast of those changes as well. And obviously striving for greatness is important. So how do you manage a project like this when your own staff resources need to be focused on that site? There's also that compelling thing. It's such a joy to work on a new site launch. And that's actually a joke because that's really tough, really a difficult thing to do a site launch. A lot of stress, a lot of anxiety goes into that. A lot of draining aspects of a site launch, as many of you, I'm sure know. So how did we approach this particular perspective? I'm not sure we would make the same decision in every scenario, but we did choose to use a consultant to help manage this project for us. We didn't just choose any consultant, though. We chose a consultant who was very knowledgeable of our business, knew our content, knew our members. It was a woman named Maureen DeRosa who also used to head up our publications area. So that is an advantage when you see this overall project, that we had a very knowledgeable consultant who had a good understanding of our business and of our content. So another thing to be thinking about is defining the scope of the partnership and managing the budget. A lot of us are in publishing because we don't like that math stuff. We like to write, we like to edit, we like to do those sorts of things. This is very critical to have some people on the team that are looking at the math and looking at the business. There was a lot of legwork, as you saw from the press release going out earlier in the year. Letter of agreement came 6 months later. A lot of legwork went into that agreement. There's been a lot of work to manage the budget as we go through it. And also, as we went through it, there were inevitably some subsequent parts of the letter of agreement that needed attention as we encountered things that we didn't foresee through the process. So that continues to be an important part of the project and of the time. The third thing is that there are unique content challenges of developing a clinical diseases support platform that's relevant to multiple countries. You think the language barrier is not strong on this one, but there are unique needs about how medicine is delivered in countries around the world. That's something we're still learning, and actually something that we're expecting to do additional deeper research as this progresses. Just to note, one thing that's different about the two countries is that I was going to say here in the U.S. I'm not here in the U.S., am I? I'm in Canada. So, okay. But in the U.S., pediatricians are typically primary care where they're seeing all kids come in through, and they need to have that general knowledge of the wide scope of child health. But in the U.K., pediatricians are considered specialists or subspecialists. And the kids, the front line, are the GPs, the general practitioners, handle primary care. So when we built the U.S. site, we're looking at it from that model of this, the way that pediatrics is practiced in the U.S. But in the U.K., it is different. And that's an important thing to be aware of as we went through the process, and that's why I'm going to dive into this one with a couple extra sub-slides on this very challenging part of it. Some of the differences between the sites, they are not they're not a cut and paste site from one to the other. There were distinct differences between them as we went through the process. So our signature product in the AP Textbook of Pediatric Care, that content is on the UK version, but it's de-emphasized. On the US site, it's pretty much front and center. It's another resource on the PCO UK site. This is still surprising to me, and if you look at the site a few years from now, it might be different, but our signature Red Book content of pediatric infectious diseases is not on the PCO UK site yet. Instead, it's using the UK Green Book. Coincidentally, that's also well known by a color But that's the publication that the UK practitioners are used to, so for the launch, they went with just that. We'll see how that evolves going forward. Probably the key part of the site is that the US site has something called point of care quick reference content, which is very bulleted and condensed content on common childhood diseases and symptoms and things like that. What the UK version did is it used that as its core building block for the site, and they adapted our quick reference content into something that they wound up calling the key practice points on the site. And if you visit the UK site, you'll see that as front and center on there. Something that I will note is that we did use the same vendor for the two sites, so that's notable. We also used the same general framework for both sites. That's also notable. I think you probably could guess that because of the condensed time frame. And this whole site was built on the back of prior decisions that the AAP made to build the US site. I'm going to talk just a little bit about the editorial process. There were 4 representatives from our US editorial advisory board who participated in the UK process. Our overall board has a core group of 12, and 4 of them participated in this particular project. The US, I'm going to point out a URL at the bottom. You might want to take a picture of that. There's a nice explanation on the PCO UK site that describes in more detail this review process as well. The US quick reference topics were supplied to the UK, and then they were adapted into those key practice points. There was a review process that involved both the UK and the US experts, and although I like to joke about it, it was not just focused on the British spellings and making sure we caught all of those. It was really focused on aligning the content to UK standards, adding key links, making sure that it applied to the users of the site in that area. Okay, another interesting one, at least interesting to me, hopefully to you too, is when the mission is similar but not the same, how do you manage that sort of thing? To have mission alignment within partnerships, you would think on face value that the missions are identical, and we are 2 organizations that are dedicated to the health of all children. We're also dedicated to evidence-based pediatric medicine, and thank goodness, so there's a lot of common ground there. But you do have to keep in mind that both organizations are accountable to their individual memberships. They're going to be looking through it from that perspective, and different sites may have to make different decisions based on their constituencies. There's also an important thing, that mission is really important to the AAP, and as a publishing house within a mission-driven organization, we had to resist the temptation to think of this only as a mission project. We had to stay true to the value of our content and also to the intellectual property and the expertise that we were bringing to this project. And I do think that it's easy to say, but it's for the kids, it's for child health, but you do have to value the talents and abilities and work of all of your members, your authors, your editors, and your staff. There's also, I don't think this is a surprise to anyone, but there's variations in access and business models. So the 2 sites right now are not using identical business models. This hasn't been a major complication. I put it on here because it could be a major complication for efforts that you do. It has not been a big thing for us. But just to explain the US site, this is an example of the inside workings of our site when you're looking at various memberships and subscriptions you have within our account. Our site has, the US site has subscription access for individuals and for institutions. Pediatric residents are provided complimentary access through a sponsorship. UK has actually changed their model since that first day in 2014 until now, and this is in response to some of the needs of their own society, is that they're offering the PCO UK to all RCPCH members as a member benefit. And they have not fully mapped out their institutional models, although that is on the roadmap for the future. So this is something to keep in mind. I'm on number 5 of 97 tips. Oh, no, only 9. Okay. Number 6 is, I only call the hockey stick references I'm hearing. That reminds me that I am in Canada. This isn't, well, this could be a hockey stick in some way. But just remember, and I think you know this, but you might need coaching or remembering of this sort of thing, how lessons learned from a platform product launch can streamline the learning curve on partnership projects. And that's a lot of the value that the AAP is bringing to this project, that your staff and your team has skills and talents and experiences. They've learned lessons, they've made mistakes, they've corrected them, they've figured out what to do to make a site launch. And if you do have a partnership with another group, you're bringing that to the table. That's really invaluable for helping others to ride the same wave on a product launch. Okay, I hope this actual thing doesn't mean anything, this image. It's just supposed to illustrate the concept of a circular pattern of learning from a project. One of the things that I'm looking forward to going forward, now that the PCO UK site has launched, is how this partnership can help us learn, how we can now improve the Pediatric Care Online US site based on this partnership. Any experiments that our partner wants to do, we're going to learn from that. We're going to start to learn from some of their successes and failures and be able to pull that back into the original brand. And in turn improve that existing brand. We have collaborations with our vendor right now. Luckily, the timing does work out where afternoon in the UK and morning in the US does work out okay for a lot of our project conversations. And it has been really interesting to hear some of the needs that they have and how it mirrors the needs that we have. Helps us get a better understanding faster about additional abilities and limitations of our vendor. If they decide that they are prioritizing something that we haven't yet prioritized. This 8th one is also, I think this was with us from the start, just the opportunity to work with another sister organization across the globe is always part of the AAP mission, and we do this not just with the UK, obviously, but having the opportunity to work with another society on a global project can lead to other opportunities. There's a significant quality improvement exercise that the Royal College is participating in, and this has helped pave the way for U.S. involvement in that. I think they're doing some great things that we're going to be also be able to bring back to the U.S. To help some of our efforts. The Meds IQ project that I'm talking about, it's about medication errors, and because they're a significant but preventable cause of harm to children and young people. And this is something where there are many, many other opportunities for collaboration going forward, and we've only scratched the surface on that. Okay, and the 9th one, and this is truly the last one, is to continue to circle the globe with this type of opportunity. We're keeping our eyes and ears open to the possibilities based on this exercise. We've had a lot of interest in a Spanish language version of PCO, knowing that there are nuances to that make it difficult with the various dialects of Spanish around the globe. We've also had serious interest from Australia on this project. We look to learn from this and also learn from some of the other speakers to how to further explore some of these opportunities. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Jeff. I suspect the next time we see him at SSP, it could be Sir Jeff, the Queen will be guiding you, and there may be a yellow book, the Merchant of Okay, our next speaker, the last one for this session, is Michael Duckworth, the former director of the University of Hawaii Press. Michael's brave enough here to not use PowerPoint, so I'll let Michael take it away. He's going to sort of highlight some of the book and translation issues around this topic, so hopefully you're getting a really good sort of feel of everything.
Thanks very much. I left University of Hawaii Press in March after 2.5 years plus there as director and publisher. Before that, I was with University of Hong Kong, Hong Kong University Press for 5 years as associate publisher, and before that, University of Washington Press for 12, 13 years. Going back to the beginning there, I had some occasional interaction with international publishing. We worked a lot with NUS Press in Singapore. And since then, I've gotten more and more involved with licensing and translation and co-publishing dialogues in China and in Asia. I'll spend most of my brief remarks talking about my experiences at Hong Kong University Press and provide a few anecdotal snapshots on what we were facing, what we were confronting as we tried to publish both multilingually and multiculturally. So Hong Kong, a brief bit of background, about 6 million plus people. More than a third of them trace their heritage to Shanghai. Hong Kong is in the south of China, and yet there's a fair contingent of northerners there, Shanghainese. Long debate in Chinese history about what is the true source of Chinese culture. There's a long south versus north argument, and that came sharply into focus at Hong Kong U Press. We published about 50, 60 books per year. 80% of them were in English, 20% or so were in Chinese. But which Chinese? Simplified Chinese has many fewer characters. This is the simplified version that Mao and the communists introduced in the middle 20th century to help increase dramatically literacy. It succeeded in that regard. However, many characters, as I said, were lost. When North American scholars would approach us at Hong Kong U Press, please publish my book in Chinese because I want it to have an impact there. Their first thought often was simplified Chinese. I want it in the mainland. A couple of problems with that. Number one, a lot of the educated elite in China are fluent in traditional complex character Chinese. That's one advantage to publishing in simplified in traditional character Chinese. Sorry, our marketing department had some resistance to the idea of publishing in simplified Chinese, some hesitation about whether we could get books into those marketing channels in China, and then the book immediately became somewhat suspect on the book tables of Hong Kong and also Taiwan, which is traditional and complex characters. But we were successful in many respects, but we needed to, we were able to publish in Chinese in both languages, but it took several battles internally to struggles, arguments, discussions about what is the real market potential, who is the audience, who are we really trying to reach. So we spent a fair amount of time educating our North American authors about what the reality was there on the ground. And then we would also face market barriers in Taiwan, in Hong Kong. If we publish something in simplified Chinese, bravely thinking that we might provide a sort of bridge, if we publish something in simplified characters, it would carry an imprimatur of quality, and we could help turn the tide in our little way. Well, we tried it both ways, and I think our marketing department was ultimately convinced that sticking with the native local language was preferred. We also got into several experiments with e-readers, bundling content into readers that were pre-sold. And a question there also, at what point does the publisher, in seeking to collaborate, bend a bit and compromise somewhat on what it thought was its original standards in order to meet the other side halfway, so to speak. So in co-publishing with Chinese partners, and there are, I should underline my remarks by saying I'm more and more optimistic after the last few years of Frankfurt Book Fair, London Book Fair, and the Beijing Book Fair, that the Chinese partner side is becoming rapidly, I would say, more professional in terms of engaging international norms, following contract procedures that are familiar to us, and even in the realm of dispute resolution. If things don't go quite right, can we find a common way to work it out so that next time around things will be better. In terms of selling rights, there's also I think a greater openness there in China, and there is a significant increase, I would say, in willingness to pay full price, what we would say in North America and Europe. And if we were licensing a book for Chinese translation, say in film studies, to Fudan University Press, we might receive 1,000 to 1,500 to 2,000 of upfront payment. Our book might be $50 or 60 and sell 500 copies. Their version would typically be $5 or $6 and 3 to 5,000 would be the first copy. So when we looked at opportunities to build our mission, build our brand, we were often trading impact versus revenue. Similar case with India and University of Hawaii Press. At the Frankfurt Book Fair, typically have 5 or 6 substantial conversation with Indian publishers who are very keen to have, in the case of Hawaii, books on South Asian religion, Buddhism. But the amount that they're able to pay and the price they're willing to charge is quite small. So if we were a commercial entity, we would say no to many such offers. But as an academic entity, trying to find that middle ground between commercial publishers and purely academic institutions trying to break even, we often stretched in that regard and would license files toward to POD. Indian POD solutions were emerging more and more. But still, the net revenue for a scholarly monograph selling rights to India might simply be $500, $1,000 at the most. So developing long-term institutional partnerships, which did not have immediate commercial gains, was a common feature there. In China, over several years, we did develop commercial partnerships with some prominent university presses, and I would point out a couple. I mentioned Fudan University Press. Shanghai Jiao Tong University Press is also quite strong and able to publish in English as well. Foreign Languages Teaching and Research Press in Beijing, Wai'an is one of China's largest university presses, publishing 1,000 titles per year, 400 staff, I believe. There's a great interest in publishing more in English. I think an earlier panelist or commentator in the previous panel said there's a tsunami of papers. There's more pressure on Chinese academics to publish in English in order to get credibility. And yet the nature of argument, the nature of presentation is such that it's going to take a long time. It's going to take a lot of intermediary efforts. And some of that is happening on the Chinese side, on the university presses, as I mentioned. But what I see a great need for is more editorial services that are conduits to high-powered research being presented from an Asian perspective, if you will, put that in quotes. So if you ask most people in Asia and say, well, what is Asia? Where is Asia? There's a great degree of skepticism that that's a meaningful concept for them in Asia. Things are much more broken down nationalistically or regionally. And yet there's a strong desire for an Asian voice to shape some of the major discourses of our time. My activity has been in humanities and social sciences, and it may be less the case in sciences, I'm sure, but it's quite important in trying to build the global brand to spend a lot of time investing in understanding the other side's nuances and what they mean and what they need. So in some of our collaborations with mainland Chinese publishers, for instance, we were doing a major commemorative book, 100-year anniversary of the revolution in China of 1911. China views the 19th century and 20th century as one long tale of misery at the hands of the West. There's a lot of resentment even today. If you go to China, you might be surprised at the degree to which World War II and anti-Japanese sentiment is still quite strong. There was just last September a major ceremony with Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin and the president of South Korea commemorating the end of celebrating the end of Japanese aggression. So things look different in Asia than they do, of course, here. It took us many, many days and weeks down to the wire on this major exhibition, China in Revolution, working out the precise wording of how would Taiwan be described. If it was inaccurately described from our point of view, the FLTRP would lose credibility. How could we make that argument to them without seeming to insist, as many Western publications do, that Taiwan is a separate sort of area? The need for fact-checking is also surprisingly high. Certain basic dates and facts were often wrong in the first draft coming from the Chinese side. We did have a successful collaborative partnership with Nanjing University Press on a literary studies series, Critical Zone. And I think this is a potential model for future collaborations between North America and Asia. They would do the layout and printing, and Hong Kong U Press would be responsible for the copy editing. As long as they were willing to accept our copy editing, everything worked out pretty well. But there were, things like June 4th could not be mentioned. How would we tell our author to say it differently in a way that didn't offend the Chinese sensibilities? I think things are getting, the broader awareness, again, of international market trends is increasing, and yet the market is quite different and changing rapidly. We tried, but we were not deeply successful in accessing some of the new waves of Chinese content, Dangdang and QQNet and Weibo and some of the others, but the necessity to market on multiple levels became more and more clear. We launched several ebook experiments I mentioned, and they were had limited success in terms of market impact from my point of view. We were able to make relationships at the highest level, the CN PIEC, but we realized in terms of getting our books listed so that they could be purchased by Chinese librarians, but then we realized that it would take a much longer time to reach out subject by subject and discipline by discipline to reach those academic librarians to make that affirmative choice. That took a fair amount of time and marketing effort, and there was some skepticism in the Hong Kong marketing department. Would it be really worth the effort? China may take another 5 to 10 years to truly develop. So there's a number of different mixed messages, mixed signals coming along. Two other presses in Hong Kong that are substantial and scholarly presses, Chinese University Hong Kong and City U Press. City U is much more engineering focused, Chinese U more literature. They had some success in publishing in 3 languages, on the professional book side for City U and on the literature philosophy side for Chinese U. Chinese U also teamed up with New York Review of Books to produce a sub-series of the New York Review Classics series in Chinese aesthetics. So I think that idea that China, Asia beginning to speak with its own voice with Asia-based presses in collaboration with North American partners, I think is a viable direction for the future. One of my cultural studies authors from Australia in Hong Kong, and Hong Kong, by the way, was a nice oasis, is a nice oasis for Australian academics, one of them had the notion that Australia and New Zealand scholarship combined with South Asia and Asia represented a third way, an alternative to North American and European publishing, which I think there was a combination of genuinely feeling that their perspective was not adequately being represented, and then also a sense that a frustration with the small number of gates and a frustration with the gatekeepers, a desire to sort of change the discussion, change the rules perhaps. One of her anecdotes was, we're reluctant to invite more than one North American academic to a conference these days, because if we do, the whole conversation will just evolve into job talk and we won't get anything done on the conference. The sense of outsiders and insiders. So Hong Kong U Press was able to leverage that quite well and attract a number of authors from Australia, from elsewhere, partly because our two neighbors, City U and Chinese U, were not focusing on regional issues. We developed several series that were successful as Pan-Asian topical series. So, for instance, one of them is Asian Englishes. So there's a Singapore version of English, Singlish, Chinglish, Philippine English. There are many variations, and there's a lot of local knowledge that can be gathered in studying the variations of Asian Englishes. Another series which might not have been able to be published anywhere else in Asia is called Queer Asia. And the series editors came from UK, Hong Kong, Australia, and they brought purposely, consciously, a multi-continental perspective, multidisciplinary perspective. We were able to publish some books that were forbidden in China, and they were purchased in Hong Kong and smuggled across, perhaps. We had one book translated into Chinese in Taiwan. We had to be willing to accept a different cover. In some cases, we might need to accept a different title. In the case of mainland China in particular, a lot of discussion and attention given to where the colophons would appear and how the title page would look and front matter back and forth. But I think one of the real structural impediments to further dramatic progress of Asian, North American collaboration is the very different nature of peer review. Do we mean the same thing when we talk about peer review? But Hong Kong U Press did strive to seek and get a number of diverse reviewers, and then that led to a rather diverse author base. Another thing that we did to build our brand internationally, which was, again, more significant in revenue terms, but somewhat less, in a different way, significant in impact terms. We started out doing some ebooks for NetLibrary and for eBrary, and then those were just standard web-ready PDFs. We began to collaborate with Project Muse as well. Probably had 500, 600 titles altogether. Then along came Oxford Scholarship Online, Oxford UPSO, and Hong Kong U Press was one of the first 5 partners, I believe, to join that. Huge amount of new work on the publisher's shoulders, developing abstracts and keywords for each new book. However, the revenue impact was significant in the first year, and more than that, I think we were able to get books into places we could never physically get a physical copy of the book. So we were beginning to get some sales and impacts in Bangladesh, in Africa, in places that were much harder to reach. So overall, even though the revenue sank back in the second, third, fourth years, probably to 50%, 40% of its initial level, it helped us get ebook sales overall up to 10, 15%. And that idea of working with leveraging the marketing departments of global forces such as Oxford. Cambridge has a similar service, Cambridge University Press Scholarship Online, I believe, which we did not sign up for, but I believe it's making similar kinds of stride. The question is, if we aggregate, apart from doing all the coding work on the front end that we weren't used to, and getting more metadata, is the ultimate revenue payoff, one of the challenges we face, equal to the amount of work and the semi-permanent change of workflow? Are we really able to take this on, or do we need to outsource it ourselves, or can we get our authors or our partners to do it? We would often discount bulk ebook sales 50%, 70% off, and we would often discount books 50 or 70% off. And that we began to get some indications that with Project Muse that was eroding perhaps our hardcover library sale market, because we were selling these ebooks without any DRM. North American sales are hugely important to many publishers in Asia, such as Hong Kong U Press, so maybe 60 to 70% of the overall sales volume of monographs is coming from North America. But with the rise of demand-driven acquisition and short-term loan, some of that income has dropped dramatically. So we had an interesting case last year where an author thought, there was a question with how many books have I sold. If you look on OCLC, it looked like his book had sold 1,000 plus copies, but in fact we'd only sold 230 or so copies. Well, those are virtual books that have been placed on the virtual shelves by the libraries. The press has done all the work to get the book ready, but until the library patron has checked that out 2.5 times, that purchase may not actually register through. So that sort of erosion or collapse of the hardcover library market can be pretty substantial, even for Hong Kong University Press. I'll leave it there for now and come back with questions later. Thanks.